Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play Pause Repeat, the podcast where I, your host, Brayden, talks about everything going on in pop culture, whether it's sports, entertainment, TV shows, books, movies, video games, music, anything that crosses my mind in the entertainment industry. Today's episode is about the College Football Associated Press top 10 ranking, going from number 1 Ohio State to number 10 Oklahoma. Just giving like a brief summary of each team, looking at their players, their schedule, and the predictions for all of it, and even giving my college football playoff predictions for this upcoming year. Make sure to follow Play Pause Repeat on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube, and always share and listen. Thank you for coming today, and let's dive into the episode. So welcome back to another episode of Sportstalk by Play Pause Repeat. I'm your host, Brayden, and today, I'm just going to look over the Associated Press top 10 for the college football preseason polls as we look into the college football season. So first off, number 1 in the polls is Ohio State, according to the voters. They should have been 1 last year after winning the national championship, but unfortunately they fell down to 3. This year they finally get the number 1 spots. They have 41st place votes in the AP poll, the most of any college team this year. They're led by Julian Sayin, a returning quarterback. Last year, he was a Heisman candidate, led Ohio State to an undefeated regular season, lost in the Big Ten championship game, lost in the quarterfinal against Miami. Hopefully, he does not lose again that badly in the high-stakes games. Maybe he can become more clutch this time, build off that solid freshman season. He has a ton of new weapons now. He did lose Cornell Tate at wide receiver, but he's still fine. Bo Jackson returns at running back. He had a 1,000-yard rushing campaign as a freshman last year. And not to be confused with the actual Bo Jackson that we all know and love from the Auburn Tigers. Bo Jackson is also a good runner. He's also one of the best Ohio State running backs in a while, and he looks to build off another season with the Buckeyes. Then probably the best player in all of college football, Jeremiah Smith returns for his junior season. Most likely going to be his last season, as he's going to forgo his senior season to play in the NFL next year. He's joined by Brayden who was a starter last year, now a senior, and then Chris Henry Jr., who's a freshman, a true freshman to be exact. He looks to be that breakout player for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and maybe he can give Julian Sayin some more elevated offense. For the offensive line for Ohio State, they actually have 4 returning offensive starters, so a very beefed up offensive line, very good receivers, very good running back, and a very good quarterback for Ohio State, a loaded offense. I expect them to score a lot of points, compete in a lot of games, and eventually generate wins. Moving on to the defense. In total, they actually have heavy losses on defense for Ohio State. First off, we all know rivalries. Picked 5th by the Giants. He was that breakout player for Ohio State last season. He was the highest drafted player besides Cornell Tate, at least on the defensive side for Ohio State last season in the draft. Then you also got Sonny Styles, that other linebacker, drafted 7th overall by the Commanders. You got Caleb Downs, drafted by the Cowboys in the first round as well. So 3 main starters, 3 elite players, top of their game, one of the best in the sport at the time, all leaving for the NFL draft in the first round. Not even mentioning some of the other people like Keaton McDonald at defensive tackle. But yeah, Ohio State lost so many people. They actually have 3 returning starters on defense, only 3, just 3. First of all, senior edge rusher Kenyatta Jackson Jr. He's a captain now, a senior now. Fill that void for Oliver Reese. He's going to have to step up very well and become that defensive mountaintop for Ohio State. Last year he had 6.5 sacks. I expect him to build off that this year and potentially reach 9 to 10 sacks this year. The other people that are returning on defense, Jermaine Matthews Jr. at cornerback, he had 26 tackles and 2 interceptions last year. And then Jalen McClain at safety. So overall, Ohio State has a tough defense. They still have some good players. They have some people stepping up, some people transferring in. But overall, Ohio State definitely does not look like the team they did last year. They're still overall good. I think they got improvements on offense, even though they lost Cornell Tate. But the defensive side, they definitely lost some key players. In terms of the schedule, though, they have a decently hard schedule, I see, at least, especially for Big Ten play. First of all, they play the Texas Longhorns in Austin, Texas, week 2. We'll see how Arch Manning and Julian Sayin go for about 2 of their games against each other. Then they play against Indiana and the national defending champions in Bloomington, a rematch of the Big Ten championship game. Then they play against an upstart University of Southern California Trojans team led by Lincoln Riley and Jaden Miavia as they look to create a surge into the playoff. Then they also got a home game versus the arch nemesis, Oregon, who's actually the 2 seed, the second-ranked team in the nation right now. And all that is done in a 4-week span. The Indiana, USC, and Oregon games all done in a 4-week span between Ohio State. And finally, the end of the season against Michigan, this time at home. They're going to make it 2 straight wins for Julian Say and company. Overall, I think Ohio State is going to finish 12-0, no losses. They're going to win the Big Ten Championship over Oregon and get the 1 seed in the playoff. I'll talk about the playoff later in the episode. But moving on to Oregon. So Oregon has 14 first-place votes, and they returned 15 total starters on offense. Well, in total, actually, not on offense, but both offense and defense. And many of them could have been drafted in 2025, especially Dante Moore. He was projected to go 2nd overall to the New York Jets this past year, but he decided not to. He had 3,565 yards, 30 touchdowns, 10 receptions, just in his first campaign for Oregon, and now he looks to make a surge in his second campaign. Wide receivers, they're loaded out there. They have very, very good veterans. First of all, Decoria Moore, Jeremiah McClellan, and then Evan Stewart, who's actually returning from knee injury from last year. They all started at some point for this Oregon team, and they all look to be the offensive threshold that Dante Moore needs to thrive in the system for the Ducks. Finally, Jamari Johnson, a tight end. Before we get to the running backs, Jamari Johnson looks to fill in the void left by Kenyon Sadiq. And then you got Jordan Davidson and Jair Hill Jr. returning at running back duo. Overall, Oregon is really good on offense. Dante Moore is probably one of the best quarterbacks in college football. They have elite receivers. Decoria Moore, Evan Stewart, Jeremiah McClellan, they can all be elite. Jordan Davis is a good running back. Jamari Johnson could easily step up into this game. And then you head to the defensive side. So they have a 3-man returning defensive line, all seniors too. First of all, Barrett Alexander, Amari Washington, and then the leader, Mateo Ugalele. You heard that right, guys. Ugalele, he's actually is the related to DJ Ugalele, but he's actually good though. Mateo had 6 sacks last year and looks to be that defensive force for Oregon needed. They even have a scarier linebacker corps, though, led by outside linebacker Tatum Teote. He has 68 tackles, 9.5 sacks as a linebacker especially, and 5 passes defended. And then you got the secondary loaded on the secondary especially. They have corners like Brayden Finney Jr. and Ife Obadegu. They all returned from last year. And then finally, Aaron Flowers plays safety, followed by Corey Perrick, who's actually transferring from Minnesota. So again, Oregon has another transfer from a rival Big Ten school coming to play safety for them. Last year, that was Dylan Thieneman. He got drafted first round by the Bears this past May. And so now it's time for Corey Perrick to get that turn and get drafted in next year's draft, first round, from Oregon as a safety. And looking at the schedule for Oregon, it's not as hard as Ohio State, but it's still hard. They open against Boise State, who's probably the best Group of 6 team heading into the field this year. They also play away versus USC, like I just mentioned. Lincoln Riley, Jaden Miavia, upstart Trojans team. They got to play Ohio State on the road, and then they finish their slate with home games against Michigan and Washington. Overall, I think they're going to go 11-1 in the regular season, lose to Ohio State, and then lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship game. And I think they're actually they're definitely going to make the playoff with a 11-2 record. I think they're actually going to get a good playoff seed. Tune into the ending of this episode as I give my playoff predictions. On to the next team, probably the biggest shocker of everything in this college football pool. Well, technically the team is not a shocker. Is the fact that the SEC has no first place votes for the first time since 2015, and also no SEC team is in the preseason top 2. This number 3 team is the Georgia Bulldogs, probably the best SEC team over the last 5 years. And so, but yeah, Georgia, not even Texas or any other SEC team has any first place votes this year, which I find odd. Well, it's kind of reasonable now because they haven't made a national title since 2022, actually. Since 2023, when Georgia beat TCU. Yeah, when Georgia beat TCU. That's been like a long time now, guys. since the SEC actually made a title game. First, you got Indiana, Miami, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Washington. No SEC. But moving back onto the Georgia Bulldogs. So Georgia has 6 offensive returning starters. Gunnar Stockton, the senior year for him, is also the second year. He sat behind Carson Beck, sat behind Stetson Bennett, and now he has a chance to lead the Bulldogs past the quarterfinals and into the semifinals. This past year, he had 2,894 yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 10 rushing touchdowns. So a pretty big dual-threat quarterback. If he does make the playoffs, that would actually be his 3rd ever time in the playoffs, because remember, he lost to Notre Dame in 2024 in the inaugural college football playoff quarterfinal format. So in that case, he can potentially go and have his 3rd time be the charm and finally break through, or maybe he doesn't and he just forever cursed. But Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bones return at running back for Georgia. Combined, they have 1,473 yards, 12 touchdowns, and Nate Frazier especially is probably one of the best running backs in the game right now. Chauncey Bones is the quick number 2 back, really good duo. The receiver game is reliant on veterans. First of all, tight end Lawson Lucky. He was big in the playoff last year. And London Humphreys, they're some of the only people returning. They also got a Georgia Tech transfer from the rivals, Isaiah Canyon at wide receiver. So besides Lucky and Humphreys and Canyon, I don't really see that much depth for this receiving game for Georgia. Pretty lackluster in the wide receiver game. The offensive line is really good, though. First of all, Drew Bobo, the center, he's probably one of the best players in the offensive line format of the game. Ernest Green III is a reliable player. And overall, Georgia, although not as good as they used to be with Nick Chubb and company and Stetson Bennett, they still have Nate Frazier, Gunnar Stockton, some really good tight end, Lawson Lucky, London Humphreys. Everybody's good here. But where they really do thrive for Georgia is the defensive side of the ball. All 6 members of the defensive line and linebackers corps returned from last year, most notably inside linebackers Chris Cole and Raylan Wilson. They have 2 preseason first-team All-Americans out back. Cornerback Ellis Robinson IV. He has 7 pass breakups and 4 interceptions last year. And then safety KJ Bolden, who are both, preseason first-team All-Americans. And Chris Cole, Raylan Wilson, phenomenal linebacker, secondary, and like I mentioned, the entire defensive line, all returning starters. So in terms of the schedule for Georgia, they play a home game against Oklahoma and an away game against Alabama, and then they also play Ole Miss on the road. That Ole Miss game, a huge rematch again from last year, in which Georgia lost in the quarterfinals against Ole Miss and lost barely, just 43-35 in a thriller game. I have to note, Georgia has games against Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Georgia Tech. Although Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Georgia Tech don't pose a much threat to the Bulldogs, I do think they can be surprise teams that could surprise the Bulldogs and potentially walk away with a win. So do keep in mind those teams. I predict Georgia to go 11-1, SEC champions, their 3rd straight title in 3 years. The one team I think they're going to lose to is Alabama again. They haven't beaten Bama in a long time. Well, they beat Bama the last time they played, but they haven't beat Bama in the regular season for forever, basically. It'll be 3 straight losses to Alabama if it does happen. But yeah, that's Georgia for you guys. Number 4 team is Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They have 6 first-place votes, more than Georgia, but they're below Georgia at number 4. So sophomore quarterback C.J. Carr is actually one of the potential Heisman favorites for this year. Last year, he had 2,741 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Notre Dame, unfortunately, did not make the playoff last year. He lost his first 2 games against Texas A&M and Miami. Although this season and this schedule does get a little bit easier. Anais Williams has big holes to fill, very big shoes. First of all, Jeremiah Love, the 4th overall pick from the draft, probably one of the best running backs of all time in college football history, led Notre Dame to the national title game. And then Jadarian Price, also drafted in the first round, to the Seahawks at 32. Price has been a big talk about the fantasy buzz on overall in football. But yeah, Anais Williams has to carry that torch from Love and Price and bring Notre Dame back to the promised land. Jordan Faison was the breakout receiver from last year. He had 640 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. Micah Gilbert comes in at wide receiver, starting, and then Jaden Greathouse, who looks to go back to his playing time during the national championship, in which he had like 2 touchdowns, I believe, against Ohio State in that national title game. But yeah, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, and Micah Gilbert round out that wide receiver room for CJ Carr. And then we move to the cornerbacks. Probably one of the best players in all of college football, Leonard Moore. He went toe-to-toe with Jeremiah Smith when they were both freshmen in the national title game. He's a CB1, corner number 1, 7 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, and the rest of the secondary is also loaded as well. First of all, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, and second-team preseason safety Bronte Johnson all contribute to this Fighting Irish pass breakup team. And then Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury control the middle of the field as the linebackers. So overall, they did lose heavily. They're definitely a lot worse, I say the least. No love, no price. Makes it a lot harder for Notre Dame to win games. But CJ Carr has definitely improved his game a lot. Anais Williams is not love, not price level, but he can still step up. Their receivers, they're a little bit iffy. Faison, Greathouse, Gilbert. Leonard Moore's a standard secondary cornerback. Their secondary is looking good. Everything else is looking decent. But I think Notre Dame's going to go 12-0. When you look at their schedule, though, they have not a cupcake schedule, actually. They actually scheduled some hard games this year. First of all, they scheduled against Wisconsin, Michigan State, Purdue, North Carolina, Stanford. That's a pretty hard schedule, guys. I mean, they play Stanford and Purdue. That's probably the hardest schedule in the league, guys. Come on. Just kidding, guys, but actually, they do play at BYU in Provo, a home game against Miami, a rematch from last year. That's on October 17th. And then they also play SMU in November. So 3 hard games, 2 of them against potential playoff candidates, 1 of them against SMU. Yeah, so I think they're actually going to go 12-0. Partly revenge for loss to Miami last year. And they don't have a conference championship, so I think they can actually get a bye with a 12-0 record. But it has to depend on the Miami and BYU games for them. And now we continue our top 5 heading into Texas. The Longhorns, as people will say, Arch Manning, probably one of those famous names in all of college football. Peyton and Eli's nephew, Cooper Manning's son, and the grandson of Archie Manning. The legacy of quarterbacks. Can Arch Manning deliver on his second stint at quarterback? Last year, he had 3,163 yards, 26 touchdowns, 7 receptions, and 10 rushing touchdowns. Last year, Texas did not make the CFP. Very disappointing. This year, they're in the top 5. Last year, they're number 1. We'll see if these lower expectations actually do deliver for Arch Manning. In terms of the running game, they have Raleek Brown, who transferred from ASU, and Hollywood Smothers, who transferred from North Carolina State. That's some really good depth on the running back side of things. Moving to receivers, even better, they got Cam Coleman, one of the top receivers, a top 3 receiver in the game, alongside Malachi Toney and Jeremiah Smith. He transfers from Auburn. Then you also got Ryan Wingo, very good player. Then Emmett Mosley IV, the final guy for the Texas Longhorns wide receiver room. Now heading to the defensive side of the ball, they have another top prospect for the NFL draft, that being Colin Simmons, an edge rusher who had 43 tackles and 12 sacks last season. 12 sacks, guys, 12 sacks. They got Trevor Gooseby on that left tackle spot for the offensive line. Rasheem Biles from Pittsburgh transfers, and then Anthony Smith is a linebacker for the Texas Longhorns defense. In terms of defensive backs, they have 2 big ones returning. First of all, sophomore Grayson Littleton, and then senior safety Jelani McDonald, who had 3 interceptions last year. Overall, they opened the season against Ohio State again. Last year they lost, but this time it's in Austin, Texas. Home field should work in their advantage. It should be a competitive game. It can go either way. Then, for the SEC slate, they play against Ole Miss on the road and Ohio State. I already said that, Ohio State. They also play against Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, and the rivalry game against Texas A&M on the road. I repeat that thing. Ole Miss is at home. Tennessee, Mizzou, and LSU and Texas A&M were on the road. So they have 2 big home games and then 4 big away games. and obviously the Red River rivalry game against Oklahoma. So for my predicted record for this team, I have them going 11-1. What team I think they're going to lose to? Probably Ohio State. They lost to Ohio State last year. Julian Satan's arguably the better quarterback. More depth for Ohio State Buckeyes. I don't think they're going to lose against Texas A&M or Oklahoma or Ole Miss, but I think they're going to lose the SEC championship to Georgia. In that case, Texas, the 5th-ranked AP team heading to the college football season. They're probably going to make the playoff this year. This should be Arch Manning's year. Hopefully no upset loss to Florida this year, and they will finish the season strong. Heading over to number 6, that being Indiana Hoosiers, the defending national champions, who had 8 first-place votes. They have another transfer quarterback. Last year it was Fernando Mendoza. This year it is Josh Hoover, who really needs to limit his turnovers after coming from TCU. At running back, they have a new guy stepping up, Kobe Martin, 6 touchdowns last year. They used a lot of their wideouts depth on the portal. They got Nick Marsh from Michigan State to transfer, and Tyler Morris from arch rivals Michigan. And this goes alongside Charlie Becker, who was big in the national championship game. Very big catches for that guy. Offensive line is fully beefed up. Carter Smith returns as a top offensive tackle in the sport. And they have a revamped D-line with the K-State transfer of Chidi Obizor and Toby Usuzama. Tyreek Tucker and Mario Landino return as a defensive tackle presence. They had big plays inside that national championship game. And then finally, the safeties, especially in the defensive backs, Amari Farrell, Jamari Sharp, the guy that had the crucial interception against Miami. They both return. And the linebacker is filled with Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones, probably the best linebacker duo in all the country. Hardy had 103 tackles, 8 sacks, 5 passes breakups. And Isaiah Jones has 78 tackles, 7 sacks. In that case, for the season projection for Indiana, they play against Ohio State, which I think they're going to lose to in that rematch of the Big Ten Championship, with wins over Michigan, USC, and Washington. They will finish the season 11-1, but they will not make the Big Ten Championship, as that will go to Oregon and Ohio State. And overall, they'll definitely make the playoff. Now, moving over to Miami, the 7th seed. They were the national runner-ups, have 1 first-place vote. Darian Mensah transferred from Duke, from ACC team to another ACC team. Looks to be that Carson Beck type prototype quarterback. He's actually a Heisman favorite right now. Last year he had 3,900 yards, 34 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. The running back is where Miami is really strong. First of all, Mark Fletcher Jr. is really good, and Shamar Brown acts as a compliment. Fletcher, for that postseason run that he had last year, had 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns last season. That's insane numbers for a college football running back. Shamar Brown, a little bit less though, 400 yards, 7 touchdowns. Still pretty good for an RB2 though. Malachi Toney, probably the breakout star of the college football playoff last year as a true freshman as well. Now he's a sophomore and he looks to elevate his game a lot. He's definitely a top 3 receiver, as I mentioned before, with Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Smith. Those 3, the best receivers in football, in college football, without a doubt. Then Cooper Barcate, also transferred from Duke, follows Darian Mensah up to Miami and plays with the team. Finally, moving to the defensive side of things. Mohamed Toure at linebacker was very massive and crucial at that national championship run from them last year, and he plays alongside Xavier Lucas, Zechariah Poyser, and Bryce Fitzgerald, who all run the secondary. In terms of the defensive line, though, Damon Wilson II transfers from Missouri to replace Reuben Bain Jr., who was a prototypical edge-rushing, pass-fearing person that everybody paid attention to. Probably one of the best edge rushers in the first round this year, without a doubt. Ahmad Moden and Justin Scott come in to place Akeem Mezzador, who was also really good for Miami last year. Overall, Miami is in the ACC, so they have a pretty easy schedule. It shouldn't be that hard. They have a game against Notre Dame, which I think they're going to lose. They are going to get challenged by Clemson, Florida State, Pittsburgh, and Virginia Tech. But overall, 11-1 season, CFP as usual, and let's see what Darian Mensah and Mario Cristobal can do for the Hurricanes this season. Okay, so before I head over to the next couple of teams for this AP college football breakdown, I gotta first talk about something very important I noticed in the AP poll. So if you scan through the top 10 you notice something very odd about the point allocation between the top 10 teams. You scroll down to number 7, Miami, the Hurricanes. Overall, they have 1,379 points. Compare that to number 8, Texas A&M. How many points do you think Texas A&M has? Remember, A&M lost to Miami in the first round last year by just 1 touchdown. A&M could have made the national championship for all we know. It just beat Miami in that first round, and a few things just go their way. Texas A&M, even with Marcel Reed back, they are at 1,131 points. That is a massive difference, if you don't know, actually. Exactly 248 points. Now, how much do you think number 1 Ohio State lost? Ohio State is at the Buckeyes. They lost Miami in the quarterfinals. They could have also made the national championship if Julian Saban was just playing better. But Ohio State is the number 1 team in the country, according to the AP poll, and they have 1,672 points. That's 293 more than Miami. So basically what they're saying is that the difference between number 1 and number 7, Ohio State and Miami, is not as much as the difference between Miami and Texas A&M. So in that case, it's basically like one tier of the 7 top teams. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Oregon. Number 3, Georgia. Number 4, Notre Dame. Number 5, Texas. Number 6, Indiana. And number 7, Miami. In that case, there's really only 7 teams competing for a national title. Everyone else is just playing catch-up at this point. Like, the entire SEC, besides Georgia and Texas, is playing catch-up. The entire Big Ten, besides Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State, is playing catch-up. And you got Notre Dame, Miami. Basically, just 7 teams competing for a national title. So expect those 7 teams to compete in that national title game, or at least make the semifinals. Some of them can fall. Some of them can rise. Now, circulating back to the main topic of discussion. Number 8 in the AP poll, we have Texas A&M. First, I had number 8, Texas A&M. They're led by Marcel Reed, who's a junior now, a dual threat quarterback, Ruben Owens at running back, and then Mario Craver, Ashton Bethel-Roman, and the Alabama transfer of Isaiah Horton at wide receiver. Then you look at the secondary. Very strong in that secondary department. Des Ricks, Marcus Ratcliffe, and Dalton Brooks all return for the Aggie defense. If you look at the schedule for the Aggies, though, they have road games lined up against LSU, Alabama, Missouri, and Oklahoma, followed by that showdown against Texas, this time at home, to end the season. I predict them to go 10-2 with losses to Oklahoma and Texas. Overall, they should make the playoffs with a 10-2 record, but in the case that they can make a deep run, they should improve from last season, I believe. Now moving on to number 9, Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin left for LSU during the college football playoff when they're just doing good. On top of that, Prince Will Emelian, one of the top defensive players, also left for LSU. So basically now, Pete Golding is left for this team that somehow made the CFP semifinal, even without Lane Kiffin. The quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss, gets another year of eligibility, and running back Kieran Lacey is one of the top running backs in the country. In terms of defense, though, they're actually pretty good, even without Emelian. Suntarine Perkins is that veteran presence on the linebacker side of things. Cam Franklin and Will Eccles anchor the defensive line. And finally, for the defense, they have veteran corners like Antonio Kite and Jalen Braxton. In terms of that season opener against Louisville, they should take care of business against that one. With home games against LSU, Missouri, and Georgia, and then road games against Oklahoma and Texas. My predicted finish for the Ole Miss Rebels is 9-3, with losses to LSU, Georgia, and Texas. Georgia and Texas are kind of self-explanatory, but LSU, you can see it going either way. Lane Kiffin versus Pete Golding, a rivalry matchup. Going to be a tough environment for Lane Kiffin to play in, but I think LSU is going to get that win. Moving on to Oklahoma. John Mateer is his senior now. He had 8 rushing touchdowns, 14 passing touchdowns, and 11 interceptions last year. Torrey Blaylock and Xavier Robinson are the running back duo. And then you got Isaiah Satania, who's really good last year, and the transfer of Parker Livingstone from Texas for the wide receiver room. In terms of defense, Kip Lewis is that defensive linebacker anchor. He gets anything. He's very versatile. Pass breakups, sacks, tackles. Tyler Wine is a defensive end presence, 7 sacks last year. And finally, that nasty secondary, led by Xavier Guillory at cornerback. And then you got the Peyton Bowen and Eli Bowen twins. First of all, you got Eli at quarterback and Peyton Bowen as safety. Finally, for the schedule, Oklahoma plays in the SEC, so it's going to be hard no matter what. Road games against Michigan, Georgia, and Missouri. Home games against Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and the Red River Showdown versus Texas. I think they're going to finish 9-3. Losses against Georgia and Texas, and a loss against Ole Miss. In that case, for Ole Miss and Oklahoma, both 9-3 records. Will they make the playoff? Remember, only 12 teams get in, with the top 5 conference champions automatically getting in. So, there's a chance that one of them, or both of them, do not get a seat at the table for the college football playoff. Tune into the next part of this episode. And so, to round off this episode of Play, Pause, Repeat, the moment you guys all been waiting for, the college football playoff projections. So, I went through the top 10 teams, from Ohio State down to Oklahoma, 1 through 10. Only 12 teams get into the playoff. 5 of them are conference champions, that being in the Big 12, Big 10, ACC, and SEC. So in that case, one team outside of this top 10 will make the college football playoff, that being one of the Big 12 teams. I'll discuss it later, though. And then also, a group of 6 team will also make it. It could be like the Pac-12, the Mountain West. So, at number 12, and as the Pac-12 champions, I have Boise State Broncos, who I think will go 12-1. They'll lose to Oregon in the opener in the beginning of the season, but Boise State Broncos, 12 seed. The 5 seed, who they'll be facing off against, will be Indiana Hoosiers at 11-1. They'll fail to make the Big Ten Championship due to Ohio State and Oregon's wins. So Indiana, Boise State in the first round. I think Indiana will pull out the win easily. But yeah. Moving on to the 8 and 9 seed. At number 9, I have Texas A&M, 10-2 record. Number 8, we have the Big 12 champions, that being Texas Tech. They'll go back-to-back in terms of Big 12 championships with a 13-0 record, but A&M will walk out with the win in this one. As for the 6 and 11 matchup, this is where it gets controversial. Number 6, I have Miami. The Hurricanes at 12-1 as the ACC champions. Number 11, I have Ole Miss at 9-3. Ole Miss, I give the nod into the playoff. Number 7 is Texas at 11-2. And number 10, this may come as a surprise to you guys, I have BYU at 12-1. BYU is only lost to come to Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. BYU has a pretty easy schedule. They should cruise through the regular season and lose the conference championship against Texas Tech. But I think BYU is going to get the nod of Oklahoma in the college football playoff race. But Texas is going to take care of business for that one. Moving on to the quarterfinals. In the Rose Bowl, it's going to be Ohio State and Texas A&M. Ohio State is going to win that one. The Fiesta Bowl between Notre Dame, the 2 seed, and Texas, the 7 seed. Notre Dame wins that one. The Peach Bowl between number 3 Georgia and number 6 Miami. I should predict an upset. Number 6 Miami to the semifinals, therefore leaving no SEC teams in the semifinals. That'll be 4 straight years without an SEC team even playing in the national championship game. And finally, Indiana, Oregon in the Cotton Bowl. Number 4 Oregon wins that one, therefore leaving Oregon, Ohio State, Miami, Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinals. First off, the Orange Bowl between Oregon and Ohio State. This is going to be the Oregon breaks out, guys. I think Oregon to the national championship. Then Miami, Notre Dame, a rematch of the regular season game. Notre Dame wins. The national championship, Oregon, Notre Dame, Dante Moore, CJ Carr, who ends up winning. I give the nod to Oregon, who claimed the first national championship in school history. There you have it, folks. That's the end of the episode. Thank you for enjoying. With that, everybody, thank you for watching today's episode. I'm your host, Brayden Shea. In this episode of Play, Pause, Repeat, I looked over the College Football Associated Press Top 10, giving my analysis of the players and the schedule, and predictions for the records of each team, while also giving my full college football playoff predictions. As we look into the next season of college football play, Make sure to follow Play Pause Repeat on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, as we expect more coverage on anything in college football and anything else in pop culture entertainment in the following future. Thank you, and see you next time.